at the end of the day, we do not know where the stockpile is. And that is the key leverage that the Iranians had. It might be in the mountain and the Iranians cannot access it. It might also be that the Iranians actually moved it before the bombings began. And as a result, they may still have access to it. So it's very difficult to say that we are actually in a better situation than we were before this attack. On the contrary, I think we're much worse, because what has also happened here is that the path towards a diplomatic solution has become far, far more difficult to pursue than it was before.
Yeah, and you've been on record saying that, look, this is there's a certain irony in this, and it's kind of sad because before the attack, about a month plus ago, if the president hadn't been swayed by Bibi Netanyahu, we probably could have gotten back to something close to, but not exactly like something that he pulled the U.S. out of back in his first term, which is the JCPOA. Look, be that as it may. So we've talked about how Iran has still significant leverage because of the enriched uranium. Nobody knows where that is or how much really they have. Also, their stock of ballistic missiles, right, which is good enough and effective enough that, Israel had to ask the U.S. for THAAD missile batteries, right, 2 of them. On the side of the West in the E3, what leverage do they have at this stage?
Well, the E3 actually has almost no leverage except the fact that they can snap back sanctions, something that the U.S. cannot do because the U.S. actually exited the deal formally. Since the U.S. is no longer a party to the JCPOA, they can no longer trigger the snapback sanctions. The Europeans can. But beyond that, they really do not have much leverage. So in the beginning, at least, they were threatening to use this leverage simply to exert some pressure and have some relevance in this equation, since Donald Trump essentially has cut them out of the negotiations. I think at this point, however, they are eager to try to find a way out of actually using the snapback, or at a minimum try to throw back the deadline, extend the deadline for another 6 or so months, and be able to keep this the leverage of issuing the threat of triggering it. But if they were to trigger it, we would see a further escalation that probably would not end up well for anyone. It certainly is not a clean-cut situation in which the Europeans could calculate that this leverage would force the Iranians to agree to compromises that they otherwise wouldn't. Rather, it's going to be this uncertainty of this escalation that is out of control, and we don't know exactly where things would end, and it would probably significantly increase the likelihood of further bloodshed.
Trita, this diplomatic track that we're ironically back to now, what would be a realistic expectation in terms of an end state or end goal? Would it be still no weaponization in Iran, or would it, and should it be no enrichment?
The contours of a realistic, sustainable deal actually have not changed. And that is still that there would be some sort of a compromise in which the Iranians do enrich uranium, but at low levels, not weapons-grade levels at all, under strict inspections with a lot of limitations in return for sanctions relief. Bottom line is that is nevertheless still the kind of deal that can be struck and should be struck if we want to have a sustainable solution. I don't believe that zero enrichment ever was in the cards. I think that was a poison pill, something the Israelis pushed for precisely because they knew it wouldn't lead to anywhere and it would lead to the confrontation that the Israelis wanted. And I think it's even less likely that it will happen now after the Iranians have been bombed. Yes, the Iranians have suffered. Their program has been set back without a doubt. But the idea that that would then make them more amenable to a compromise that they have, to a capitulation that they for 20 years have refused to agree to, I find extremely unlikely and frankly delusional. Because I think the Iranian calculation is, their perception is, if they agree to zero on enrichment, the next step is that the Israelis and the United States is going to push Iran to not have any ballistic missiles either, which essentially means without a nuclear program, without ballistic missiles, without these different groups that we call proxies, Iran then has absolutely no deterrence in a Middle East in which Israel is largely acting with impunity. There's no way the Iranians will accept that without a fight.